great. I am delighted this morning to introduce you to Jen and Grace Baron. And Jen was a corporate type, as many of us are. She worked for some very impressive companies like eBay and Johnson & Johnson and Hewlett-Packard, way back in the Hewlett-Packard days. But she is the co-founder, and actually I decided I'm envious of her current title, Chief Inspiration Officer. How many of us would like that title? How many of us probably really have that title? But we already do. But Jen is now the co-founder of an organization called Inspire Corps. And although there are many wonderful books written on leadership, again, many of you are authors of wonderful books on leadership, they thought perhaps there's a slice of leadership that has not been delved into as far as it could be, and the topic of inspiration. And you know, what I think is so interesting when I think about the field of leadership, you know, there's wonderful books on creativity. How to be creative. Can you be creative? Do you have to be born creative? They took a similar approach looking at inspiration. Are we born being inspiring? Do we have to learn to be good speakers to be inspiring? Do we have to learn to be a good leader? Or can there be something else we can learn about inspiration? And how can we use that knowledge to both inspire ourselves and inspire others in our organization? So Jen and her organization has decided to do some unique research on this topic. And again, I thought this was an interesting twist. What's kind of cool for all of you is not only is this hot off the press, this is actually before distribution. So the book goes out next week, I think, right? So next week, so you're getting an advance copy of something new. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to my new friend, Jen. Jen comes from Hampton, Connecticut. She's got two Springer King Charles dogs, and a 10-year-old son. And in a former life, although I think she still does it as well, she was actually a whitewater rafter and apparently enjoys all water and paddling. So with all of that, I hope you're already inspired to learn more about Jen, Inspire Corps, and most importantly, the research she's going to share with us today. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to call a play from, imagine that this is a blend of Alita and the Navy SEALs, and I'm going to have everybody stand up. Who's heard of box breathing? Anyone? So this is a technique that the Navy SEALs do when they want to get in sync. When they have a SEAL team that actually needs to go do something really tough and incredible, they do some boxed breathing together to synchronize. So it's pretty simple. It's just an inhale to a count of 4, and then you're going to hold to a count of 4, and then you're going to exhale to a count of 4, then you're going to hold at the bottom to a count of 4. And we tend to jump into that next breath a little soon. That fallow at the bottom where you hold empty is really important. I'm going to play some music to activate some emotions. And while we do the box breathing, I'm also going to ask that you lift your arms on the inhale, and when you hold at the top, I'm going to have you stretch a little bit. You might want to take your jacket off. You can even take your shoes off again. And so we're going to inhale to a count of 4, we're going to hold at the top and stretch, and then we're going to exhale to a count of 4 and hold at the bottom. This really isn't that woo-woo, just so you know, okay? Ariana Huffington, who I completely adore, starts every one of her presentations basically with synchronizing the room through breath. Right? And so let's go ahead and give this a try.
Broken down and tired of living life.
Inhale. 2, 3, 4, and hold and do a little reach. And on your tiptoes and exhale. 2, 3, 4. Now hold fallow. Empty. Pause. And inhale. 2, 3, 4, and reach. And exhale. One more round. Really waking everything up. And this time, as you inhale, 2, 3, 4. As you reach, notice what emotions are connected to this reach. Aspiration, ambition, excitement. Exhale.
And I'll do it 1,000 times again.
That was the music of Andra Day, a song called Rise Up. So before we get going, I want to just mention, not insignificantly, that the word inspire comes from the Latin inspirito. It actually means to breathe in, to catch breath. And so when we ask people, what is inspiration to you? Usually they have a sensation around inspiration. They can describe what it feels like, and they know what it feels like. But even Webster himself had trouble defining it, had to use the word inspiration to define inspired. So, kind of interesting. Anyone know why this figure is significant, 90,000 hours? Someone in this room probably knows. No? Oh, that's lovely. It's the number of hours we spend working in our life. 90,000 hours. So in the next about 45, 50 minutes, what I'm really hoping to do is give you some new ideas about inspiration. Really some novel kind of ways to think about inspiration. But we also want to practice it a bit. I'd like to activate inspiration in you. This is a funny place to land in a Fred agenda, right? We've been inspired the entire week. So hopefully this will be a lens that will help you both make sense of why you were inspired, but most importantly, how can you capitalize on it? How can you hold on to it? How can you translate it into something that's sustainable? So 90,000 hours. How we ended up doing this research was that 5 years ago when we founded the company, we were trying to name the company. My co-founders and I, Alison Holzer and Sandy Spataro, we kind of had a come to Moses moment, sitting around a table, and we were being really honest with one another, and we said, this is really going to suck some days. Like, if we're really being honest, it's not easy to start a company. This is going to suck some days. Most of you know what I'm talking about. So on those days, what's going to make it worthwhile? That's the question we were really interested in answering before we incorporated. And the word that, so essentially we kind of thought, we looked back at our careers and what did extraordinary look like? What were the accomplishments that we were most proud of? What did we want to replicate? What did we want to produce in the world that was different? We had been on the buying side for many years. Like, what could we bring to the market that was different and unique? And the word inspiration kept coming up. We're like, okay, well, let's go to the literature. Well, what do we know about inspiration in social science? Guess what we found? Not much. Okay. 2 people, kind of in the history of the academy, have studied inspiration, Thrash and Eliot. There's like a little bit more trickling in the last 5 years. But essentially, it's really only been looked at as a state or an emotion. And there's very, very little research. And we think the reason for that is because it's probably really hard to get tenure if you study something like inspiration. It's hard to measure, and people are like, well, that's floaty and weird, and right? So that's kind of how we explained it. Why we embarked on the research was because we believe it's a birthright for people to be inspired in their work. We believe it's a birthright. And we also believe that inspiration is a most valuable resource to be managed in modern work. So let's make the case for that. But 90,000 hours, just imagine, right? Imagine how the world could be different if people had their best days more often through inspiration. That's what we're about. So, kind of like David did yesterday, I want to spend about 4 minutes just sharing with you some baseline, and this is a working definition of what we've learned from, we've done over 100 interviews with some of the most inspiring leaders, some of the most inspiring teams, organizations that we think are sustainable, inspiring organizations. And so the first thing that we know happens in inspiration is there is a possibility. a new thought about the future that wasn't there before. Now, this is not unique in social science. This is what's called prospection, right, in the psych literature. This is what separates us from animals, that we can simulate different futures and kind of live into them. So this is not unique. What's unique about what happens in inspiration is simultaneously, almost simultaneously with this possibility, comes invincibility. What does that mean? What it means is it's a heightened sense of both courage, confidence, efficacy. What happens is you can't help but take action on something. Barriers are lifted that were there before. So the possibility that was there before may have had a barrier. Invincibility comes in and says, nope, I see the way. So this is our current working definition of inspiration as we know it. But then there was a kicker. So what we were really fascinated with and surprised by in our interviews is that inspiration is actually not a fleeting emotion. It's not something that happens to you, and if you're lucky, you catch it. It's not something that we have to wait for, but rather, it's an intentional practice. So, almost like a muscle. Like, the more you train it, not only the stronger it is, but the more you can call it forward on demand. There were also some truths that came forward about inspiration. The first one is it's incredibly personal. So what inspires me doesn't necessarily inspire you. And the attributions to how it happens are as varied as there are people, right? And personality, there's history, there's strengths and kind of what we love and passions. So very personal, and it's almost like we think about it as like a fingerprint. Like we each have our own very unique fingerprint of inspiration. Another truth that came forward, as I've already mentioned, is that it's agentic. We don't wait for it to happen to us. We can actually generate it ourselves with agency. Another truth is that we can increase the frequency and the intensity of inspiration through intentional practice. So we kind of think of everyone having an IQ on a daily basis, an inspiration quotient. And so you want to think about hitting that inspiration quotient and starting to notice if it's dropping, if it's falling. I mean, our dream is, companies will be measuring inspiration across their organization. And they'll start to notice pockets that are waning. Another truth about inspiration is it's contagious. We all know this. This is why we come to Fred. It's one of the most inspiring conferences around. So we can catch inspiration from others, and we can infect others with inspiration. So those are some of the truths. What I want, and then a really important one. There were patterns that came through in our interviews, and these patterns started to show that there are predictable ways across humans that we call forward inspiration. There are 3 categories of patterns. There are 18 patterns. We know they're way too many. We call them engines of inspiration. These are the ways that we predictably bring inspiration into our lives. The 3 categories are personal inspiration, ways we inspire ourselves. Ways we are inspired through others is category 2, or through relationships. And then the third is that there are certain situations that predictably inspire us. So for today, and this is way too much, I'm hoping that we will refine this list and continue to streamline it. But for today, I'm going to stay with some stories from the categories of inspired by others and inspired by situations, because they're a little more complicated and a little more interesting. You guys are a 3.0 audience, so I think we'll get a little more gritty. The first one that I want to speak about, and I actually have asked, Sabine couldn't make it. I'm going to talk about her anyway because I have her permission to do that. And Dee has also offered to. So I had some stories prepared for this talk, and I threw them in the trash can because what happened was in the last 2 days, there were even better stories that came forward. So, with this lens of the anatomy of inspiration, my hope is you'll start seeing it all around you all the time. Catching these stories, holding on to them, capitalizing on them. So the first story that I want to tell you about is in the Inspired by Others category, and it's Mentors and Heroes. Every one of us talked about a teacher at this conference that was a mentor for us, most of us. Some people talked about teachers that were bad, and that was formative as well. But so this is Tom Kolditz, who Michelle was mentioning. He's a retired brigadier general from West Point, and now runs the Door Institute of Leadership at Rice University. So Tom has had an interesting influence in my life, and I'm so sorry he's not here for me to be looking him in the eyeballs and telling the story, but I've said this to him, and I've not told the story exactly like this. 10 years ago, after Tom had written his book, In Extremis Leadership, I watched him give a presentation. And frankly, I've always been a little intimidated by Tom, not that I have reason to be, because he's so salt of the earth. But after this presentation, about 10 years ago, I said, that was really amazing. You are amazing. How do you do that? How are you so good at presenting? And he said, it just takes practice. And I probably looked at him and did something like, right? And he looked at me, and he did, I didn't notice till yesterday, he actually did a notice and an empathy pause. And he looked me in the eye, and he said, Jen, it just takes practice. And in that moment, I was moved to action. I actually believed him that I could learn how to do it. He then went on to say, I used to suck at it. He activated a second engine of inspiration, which is vulnerability, fallibility. And so he gave me fodder, he gave me grist to know that he wasn't bullshitting me. He actually told me about a presentation that he did that sucked, and how he recovered from it, and how he learned from it, and how much practice it's taken. Right? He had decades in the military where he had the opportunity to stand in front of big audiences and practice. So I wanted to tell that story because I think it's a great example of truly how inspiration can happen in a 3-second exchange that can carry forward in someone's life for 10 years. Okay? So we can all be looking for these ways to mentor and lift and bring one another up. I want to get to a bunch of these stories, so I'm gonna kind of move them. We're gonna go deep on one particular engine because I think that's more illustrative than bouncing around. And the engine that I want to go deep on is the engine of overcoming constraints. This man spends more time in the operating room than anyone else in the state of Connecticut. Literally, he's a brain surgeon that out-operates everyone in the state. And we were really curious about what drives him. His name is Khalid Abid. He's in the book. And one of the reasons we tell the story is because it was so surprising what his answer was. We asked, what inspires you to be who you are in your craft and to push so hard every year? And he told the story about how he's the oldest of 7 first-gen immigrants. His parents were first-gen. And landed in Detroit, Michigan. His father worked at an automobile factory, and he was heading off he was actually trying to get into medical school. And he had to work at his father's automobile plant in order to be raising money just to be applying to medical schools. He also felt like he couldn't go to medical school before he helped his family buy a new refrigerator because they were using coolers and kind of eating out of coolers. So he's at the automobile plant, and on his lunch breaks, he would be studying for the MCAT. He had huge books all around him. One of his father's colleagues would come up to him every day at lunch and say, "Cullen, you're not going to medical school. Like, you're really wasting your time even thinking that you can do this. There are plenty of jobs here. You don't want to leave home. Stay with us." Colin told the story that incident wakes him up at night to this day. He sees the man, he wakes up, and he's like, "Let me go operate." Overcoming constraints is wildly inspiring for a lot of people. We interviewed a lot of people who said, one of the most inspiring things that gets me is when I'm told no. The word no fires me up. So, I'll give you one more example of this that we heard just earlier this week. Sabine, who is on the Next Gen Council, and that's why she was here this morning, told a story about, her family's from Romania, and she was 7 years old. Her grandfather was sketching, and catch me if I don't, you were there, right? You weren't there. Was anybody there? Anybody else there? Yeah. So check me on this. Her grandfather was sketching out the family tree and putting her brothers on the family tree, but for some reason she wasn't listed on the branch with her brothers. And so she said, "Why am I not on the branch at 7 years old?" And he said, "Because you're a girl." And at 7 years old, she said, "Oh, hell no." She didn't say that, but she basically was like, "I'm going to get on the tree, and everybody's going to be really sorry that I didn't get on the tree." So that was when she knocked herself out to become this amazing professional in finance. That was a moment of inspiration, and they stay with us. And we can call on them and come back to them. All right, Dee. Come up.
I'm wearing the same outfit as last night.
Oh my God, you're so cute. It was meant to be. Come up with me. Come. So I'm at the water cooler, and I'm at the water. Where are we on time? We're good. I'm at the water cooler 2 days ago, and I hear this whisper about ecstatic dance. And I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in paying attention and like being present and like noticing, because inspiration is all around you, and if you forage for it, it's there. And so she says ecstatic dance, and I said, "Did you just say ecstatic dance?" Well, it turns out ecstatic dance has been on my list of things to do for like 10 years, right, that I've never made it to. So tell the story.
That's not what's happening right now, by the way.
Just to be reading clear.
Maybe. Okay, maybe. Let's see how it goes. So yeah, some of you know this, because I've connected with quite a few of you over the last few days to hear this story.
I haven't heard this right.
Okay, you will. So yeah, I've been completely deaf in one ear all my life, and with increasingly decreasing hearing in, we call it good ear, which is not so good at all. And growing up in rural Ireland, in case this accent didn't give me away, shock horror, I had lots of tests and like brain scans to see, they didn't know when it happened or how it happened or how much worse it was going to get. All they could determine was, all you can do is try to protect what little hearing you have, and it might all be gone by the time you're a teenager. So I've always had this kind of paranoia about losing my hearing, and subsequently it's given me an abundance of gifts throughout my life in so many ways. I've never owned a TV, but I have this collection of records because I love the texture of sound, so I just really, really love music. I come from a family of musicians, and Irish people are very musical, but I'm probably the only Irish person who's ever asked to mime while everybody else is singing along, because I'm also tone deafness. But I didn't. No talent and no shame. It's a terrible combination. And I had to learn how to speak from a really young age. I had serious speech challenges. And similar to Sabine's story, because I wasn't there when she shared that, I remember being really young and the doctor telling my mother she can't have a Walkman, make sure she doesn't get a Walkman. And I remember thinking, I have no idea what that is, but I want it. I remember thinking it was like a candy cane stick or something. I said, I want that. My brother can have one. So the challenge came up about communication, and it happened a lot. People said you'll struggle with communication or roles that involve like communication. And I remember thinking, right, let's see, somebody hold my drink, because I'm Irish, I always have one. And had to learn how to communicate, but subsequently was fascinated by the things I was learning and was able to teach those to others, and it gave me my career. And this whole idea of punching above my weight and feeling like I'm taking on a bigger challenge that's so much bigger than me, it makes me hold other people to the same standards, so I'm a positively dangerous performance coach as well at the same time.
I bet.
And having to look at people in the face, really liberate. If I can't see you, I can't hear you. Basically, so I stare at you intently when I'm speaking. It helps build rapport as well, right? And it helps people to feel, seen and known and heard at the same time too. But all that combined, fast forward 35 years, and 6 months ago when I got off the boat, bringing fresh off the boat from Ireland to America, I went to see a doctor about this paranoia I had for losing my hearing in my good ear. And she tested me and she said, it's not as bad as you think it is, but there's some stuff we can do here. You're in Silicon Valley. And it involved drilling a screw into my skull, which my father said I should definitely do, because even if I died, I'd die furthering medical research. It was pretty painful. Being so far from home and having that done, it was awful. Like literally the screw in your skull. Like try to imagine that for a second. And literally had to screw loose for 3 months. And the bone had to grow around the screw before they could attach this device, which picks up sound, it filters out the white noise, and it uses my skull as a conductor to play it into my other ear, which is, it's amazing. And you can imagine, being in the role that I'm in, I've dragged my way through it in so many ways, like overcompensated in some ways for lack of hearing, but somebody might make a great point, and I'd say, great point. Somebody over there would say, yeah, that was me. But now I can orientate sound. Can you imagine how amazing that is? And no matter who's playing any music, I'm in floods of tears. So I could never dance. Back to the story. And I always felt insecure about dancing, a mixture of bad balance and, not necessarily having the rhythm. So I found out this ecstatic dance thing was happening on Sunday in San Francisco. It was at a church, really near to Golden Gate.
Tell them what ecstatic dance is, as best you can.
It's like a nightclub in the middle of the day. You can't drink or take any drugs of any sort whatsoever. You can't wear any shoes of any sort whatsoever, and you can't speak to anyone. So you go in and you just dance for like an hour or 2 hours. And I went in, well, first of all, I stood outside for 10 minutes going, I can't do this is going to be terrible. Because people were practicing, like, trying to run over shoulders, etc. outside, and I thought, this is going to be awful. And I thought to myself, why do I feel so uncomfortable about this? Why, who am I trying to impress? And then I realized it was myself. I was just wanting to prove to myself that something I thought I could never do, I'd be able to do. So I went in and I danced my socks off. I had no socks off. I danced a lot. And it was brilliant, and I was just like so joyful. And I looked like an absolute idiot. I felt like a beautiful idiot. It was really wonderful. And I just had this glow afterwards. And it was amazing. I promised myself I'm going to dance every single day. And that was on Sunday. And I woke up Monday late, got dressed really quickly, and came here and thought, didn't do any dancing today. And in walks. That's amazing. Thank you for letting me share.
Oh my God. So I heard like 20 seconds of her story, and I wanted to drop to my knees and say, truly, like, I can't believe that I waited 10 years to go ecstatic dance. She had the courage to go, because I didn't go because it took courage. Like, it sounded wild and weird and awesome, but I gotta be in the right mood, or whatever, right? And, like, you didn't have a sense of how to do that in the world. And you showed up. I was so moved in that 20-second story. I was like, oh my God, you have to tell the story. So I'm hoping she'll indulge us in the next book. But that is what overcoming constraint, that is how that inspiration engine can work at its very, very best. I can't wait to talk with you like in the next 6 months as you're continuing to do things like ecstatic, right? Like come dance with you. Yes, let's do it today. Let's not wait. Okay, now where are we going? All right. So I do want to leave a little bit of time for us to just dialogue, and I have an an experience that I want us to have together also right at the end. So in order for there to be enough time, here's what I'd like to say. This is important. Let me give this 3 minutes. So something happened about halfway through the interviews where we interviewed several people, and the inspiration that they brought forward was actually pretty dark. So not in the way that constraints are dark, but like loss and grief and failure. And we're like, what's going on here? Of course, it's, part of the human experience is part of the spectrum of what's possible in emotion. And this gentleman with the tie is Joe Casper, and he was one of the interviewees where this happened. He and I were friends in grad school, and he really has an amazing story. His son, Ryan, who is in the chair, had a disease called La Forna, and he died when he was 19. And Joe is a physician, he's an MD, and so he had to kind of carry through almost over 10 years, almost 10 years of not knowing what was wrong with Ryan and figuring it out, and then knowing that his son was going to die. So as an MD, you can imagine what that is. He actually created, it's called code destiny. It's a theory of grieving parent, a grieving parent kind of intervention. Essentially, when we were interviewing Joe, he said to me, Jen, one of the things that's most inspiring to me is my grief. And I said, what? He said, I keep my grief close as a source of inspiration in my life. Tell me about that. And that was when he told me about his, what he's worked on in Code Destiny. It was featured in Sheryl Sandberg's book, Plan B, Option B, I mean. So inspiration isn't always just bright and shiny and lifty, and the truth is there's an amazing new literature coming up called post-traumatic growth, and it really studies how after incredible trauma and hardship, how people make sense of it and actually build stronger. Right? How does that happen? Because it doesn't always happen. So just another aspect of inspiration that we think is important that we want you to know about. So lots more in the book. I wanted to give you just a bite of crab cake in this 12-course meal. I'm not going to tell this story because it is in the book, but it did happen at Rice University, and it's the story that Tom told. It's very similar to the one that Sam told yesterday. Like around a crisis, around urgency, it's real. Inspiration contagion is really kind of amazing. I encourage you to get involved in crises, right? If for no other reason, to experience that inspiration, to see what's possible, and to learn. So this was at Rice University during the hurricane, and what's amazing about this is the story of contagion. I'll just tell you quickly that Tom's deputy inspired Tom by taking a very small action, right? She just took a picture. She's like, we're not shutting down. She took a picture of a class online, sent it to Tom and said, Door Institute staying open during the hurricane. Tom was inspired. He sent the picture to the provost. He said, Door Institute staying open during the hurricane. Let us know how we can help. 3 hours later, the provost said, you can help. We've got 1,200 students who want to make a difference with people who are stuck all over Houston. So within 24 hours, they had mobilized. Thank goodness Tom had his military background, because they figured out how to let students go out and come back and be safe. It made a difference in thousands of lives, and I guarantee that is the experience that a lot of those 1,200 students will take with them for the rest of their life. Like, it was when they were able to jump in and make a difference during the hurricane. So that's an example of inspiration contagion at its best. Okay, let's discuss. I'm so eager. I have to tell you, I never planned to write a book. This is a moment, right? I mean, I'm just grateful to be sharing everything that we've done, everything that we're doing. And the book comes out on Tuesday, so I need some tough questions so that
ask you a tough, well, I don't know that I want to be in the tough question category, but I have a question.
Great.
So one of the, and I'm wondering about how to frame this. So I loved some of your stories about the overcoming constraints. And one wondering I have is around some of what my sense making around this is some of where we source motivation or inspiration maybe is from things that are like, I would maybe call like below the line, right? Or things that we're in reaction to or that motivate us from sort of like a not that way, right? So one of my questions is if I think about sort of above the line inspiration, if that framing makes sense to you, which is like something I'm moving towards or something I want more of or I'm stepping into, is there also a piece of that, or how do you put those two in conversation?
Yeah. I mean, like just shooting from the hip. I think the stronger you can train inspiration proactively, if I understand you're above the line, like where you're not responding, you're not in crisis, you're not just kind of taking what comes along and doing your best, the stronger you can train inspiration proactively, like leadership, hello, right? I mean, we all know the difference between the calls that are turnaround calls and the calls that are like, we have this amazing leader who we're promoting and we want them to be successful. Awesome! Right? I mean, there's a big difference. So the stronger we can train on the proactive side, then I think the more we even are ready on the reactive side. I mean, that's the kind of the first thing that comes to mind. I mean, red cape, blue cape, like we can't always control what life's serving up. So I think training and inspiration on the proactive side helps when we really need it on the reactive side. Any follow on? Okay. Paul. Oh, I'm so sorry.
I have two first names.
Oh my God, I have to rewrite my script. Oh no, I'm totally going to.
Yeah,
No, I'm going to.
So, I work in a culture that's shifting, like it's transforming, trying to go to a new place.
Yeah.
One of the things that's handicapping it is the fear that permeates the organization. It's talking about. Like, it's kind of like a little bad courage, right? We've got fear. So I'm wondering how to leverage inspiration as a lever to kind of crowbar fear out, so to speak.
Yep.
Anything in the research you did or people you've talked to that...
The invincibility is when, like, the possibility and your belief that it can happen, whether it's because, it's just time or there are people around you who see the possibility as well, that actually overshadows the fear. That's what the invincibility is. It's like you want that thing bigger than you're afraid of it.
Yeah.
So I think about it as like a tipping point. So keep at it. Like you never know where that next kind of wave is going to come from. And I'm with you. It's so hard. Culture, like, it's the total real deal. It's through every conversation, through every leader, through every hire, through like shifting culture. Yeah.
It sounds like you codified the engines through your 100 interviews and the stories that you heard. But I was interested in what you said at the beginning, which was this idea of an inspiration index. How can you measure it, either individually or a team or an organization? Is that the next stage?
Yeah, we actually have we call it the Inspire Q50. And it is, a way to start to get a pulse on an individual's inspiration, a team's inspiration, and we're building it out so that we can kind of have it work across teams and teams, so at a culture level. But it's totally grounded in these ideas, like how often are you inspired? Do you know how to inspire yourself? Do you know how to inspire others? What does it look like?
50 questions?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot to learn. And obviously qualitative is usually more, interesting, so we'll have a qualitative element to it as well.
I'm thinking that the word inspire is one of those words that kind of connects to everything else. So whether you're talking charisma or empowerment or innovation or almost anything you want to talk about, there's a dimension of it So in this sense, I'm thinking that inspiration is a kind of meta mood. And in my own work, which is very much aligned and connected to producing a result called people are inspired.
Yep.
And people are responsible for inspiring themselves. I mentally think of it more as a taking something away as opposed to just learning new practices or putting things in. So as an example, I think we all learn, I think we're naturally, children I think are naturally inspired.
Yes.
You know, that they're inspired by little things and bugs and, you know, anything in the world. So somewhere in the enculturation or the learning process, we sort of unlearn how to be, we unlearn inspiration. And so I'm thinking that inspiration is more of a way of being. And my question is really, are there, in your engine idea, are there things that are more connected to being as opposed to practice?
There are practices that I think are more connected to being, and
What are the 2 or 3 or 5 most important?
like that are heavier weighted, like activating your strengths. Right? I mean, there's really good research to support that, and it's one of the engines in individual inspiring oneself, purpose and meaning. That's a meta, right? I mean, it's a high octane engine, and without it, a lot of the other engines aren't possible. Yeah, but I hear what you're saying. I think when the way of being wanes, what do you do? What does one do? And that's what we're really interested in, because we want people to be able to generate it for themselves. And so, yeah.
So, I mean, kind of following on that, because that's where my curiosity was going. Because I've always thought of inspiration as, I don't know where the name of literature or research person I got from, but in spirit, right? So it's really more of a spiritual, internal mechanism that you turn on or off based on your interactions with whatever. So I'm just curious where religion or where people, you know, more inner truth to themselves and those around them.
Yeah, I mean, religion came up a lot in how we inspire ourselves, that sense of belonging, that sense of connection to something bigger than ourselves. We kind of group it within meaning, because it's not for, you know, it's not everyone that finds that. Some people, I mean, to your point, some people don't think about inspiration as more spirit. Like, we interview people who, they say, when I'm inspired, like, I'm awesome. Like, it's about their performance and their achievement. And that is how they get inspired. Like, that is what a best day looks like for them, if that makes sense. So really, it's like the fingerprint is real. That not what what inspires you isn't necessarily what inspires someone else, but you explain the same ontological experience of inspiration. So one more question, then I want to give you a little taste for yourself that kind of helps ground this. Yes, Alejandro.
It looks like inspiration in the end is a choice. And if that's the case, the challenge for a leader is that ultimately and in the end, it's not what you do, it's what your people choose to believe, act on. So did you explore the implications for leadership?
Totally. We totally blew out the implications for leadership. And we're more confident than ever that everyone is a leader and has the opportunity to inspire themselves. And through how they inspire themselves, has the opportunity to inspire those around them. So we are way on the line as leaders for inspiring ourselves first, and then noticing maybe when inspiration is waning with those around us, and understanding what they need, moving toward it. You know, how does that person need me in order to be inspired themselves? But the other thing that's really important is inspiring leadership doesn't look like one way, right? Like we used to think 20, 30, 40 years ago, like that it was charisma. We get really inspired by people who are incredible technicians, like watching craft, watching excellence. That can be incredibly inspiring in a leader. We do an activity, an exercise, when we're working in organizations where we have them talk about the leader that's been most inspiring to them, then we code it across 4 different, basically, kind of leader styles, leader competencies. And usually the most inspiring leaders have 3 out of 4, which just speaks to, a lot of inspiring leadership is correlated to agility and speaking a broad language that speaks to more people. It's acknowledging the value of diversity, right? Actually having language that speaks to strengths across the continuum. So, I got a little technical there. Did that answer your question, kind of?
Yeah, I think it's just enormous reflections going on with me right now in terms of multicultural dimensions, multi-country. It creates a real challenge for a leader to listen real well. But the myth that leaders inspire is one of the challenges right now, right? That your book presents. Perhaps it's something we need to explore. How do leaders inspire?
I mean, what's threaded through all of this, especially as it relates to inspiring leadership, is the listening piece, right? That you really want to be listening for that fingerprint of what's inspiring the person across from you, and what moves them, and what do they need from you. So here's the exercise, and then we're going to need to close and do this experience real quick. I want you to just think about your best days. Right? We each have several in any given month. You can close your eyes. Like, what happens on your best days? You can't imagine the diversity of responses that we hear. The answers to this question are amazing. This is your fingerprint. It's not exactly your fingerprint, but it's a good place to start. It's a good place to start digging in terms of what inspires you and what you need to be doing on a daily basis to increase your inspiration quotient. I mean, from steel-cut oatmeal, I'm telling you, to organizing a drawer. The things you hear and what it codes to. So in closing, I want everybody to stand up. We'll get you to the next adventure on time. The world needs your inspiration. It needs your dreams and your aspirations and your goals. It needs the gift that you've been given. The world needs your inspiration. It needs you to be you and to know that it matters because they matter. This will not be easy. There will be days when you want to give up. In those moments, you must remember why you're doing this, who it's for, and let that serve as the inspiration to keep going. So let's keep dreaming. Let's keep sacrificing. Let's go to bed late. Let's get up early. Let's do what it takes and figure it out and get it done. Because the world needs your inspiration. I dare you to inspire. Thank you.